Charles Gracie and his co-host Paul Gibson. Joined by Josh Haynes, they'll be tackling tough industry topics, asking even tougher questions, all to find better solutions as they try to make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes, and good trucking companies are just like trucking parking. There's about one for every 11. Gentlemen, what are we talking about on today's episode?
We're talking driver burnout.
Yeah, we're talking about driver burnout. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, like companies have drivers and they don't really realize the effort that actually goes on the road and how things are different on the road for drivers than they are on paper. So we've actually got some, former drivers on to actually talk about what those differences look like and what you as a company can do to make their jobs a little bit easier on the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important topic, and I think we got a lot to discuss, but why don't we hop in to talk about our sponsors real quick and just get into 10-2 news?
Sounds good.
Well, our sponsor for today's episode is MVT, Mesilla Valley Transportation, where family, careers, and success come together.
All right, well, now that that's out of the way, it's time for 10-2 news. All right, so this week, the first thing we're going to cover is A1's Towing, the infamous towing company out of Memphis, which we kind of reported on that driver got stuck in his truck for 33 hours dealing with him a couple weeks ago, has now been banned from operating until at least after Christmas. Their lawyers trying to fight it, saying they're not doing anything different than what other towing companies are doing in downtown Memphis, which is arguable because it's a pretty shady practice. But it's nice to see that someone's helping out drivers for at least a month, right?
It's like Merry Christmas. You won't get booted.
Early Christmas presents. Do they work for A1 Steak Sauce, or is this just a different company altogether? Because,
Different company, Josh.
All right, cool. Just double checking.
If it was a steak, though, there's nothing about it that's well done. So that was a nice little update. All right, so our second story is about a driver who took a load from Pilgrim's Pride of frozen chicken. It was a 41,000-pound load of frozen chicken, and it was estimated about $80,000. It was going from South Carolina to a couple locations in Georgia, and essentially what happened is someone said that, like, this driver was selling the chicken off of the load. So the cops got a hold of him, and they did a inspection of his truck, and all they found was 8,000 pounds of chicken.
So he was how many pounds short?
33,000 pounds.
33,000 pounds of chicken that they think that he had been delivering and selling off on the side to various people. Like frozen chicken falling off the back of the truck, essentially, is what was happening.
Could you imagine the break you needed to stop and move all that chicken?
I was going to say, how long did it take him to get from destination A to B? And did he think the company wasn't going to notice? That's a lot of chicken that's missing. Sorry, I had a lot of Kentucky Fried Chicken stops. I had to hit, went through, KFC a couple different times. That's a lot that's missing, guys.
Hey, you got to close that gap on driver pay some way.
What I think is most interesting, though, is how did those conversations go? Was he selling it directly like, hey, man, you want some chicken? Or is there somebody out there that's like, hey, man, if you need frozen chicken, I know a guy.
And then he steps out behind the trailer like, I'm the guy.
Just nicknamed him the Colonel. All right, gentlemen, it's time to move on to our next segment, and that is Behind the Wheel.
All right, so it's time for Behind the Wheel, where partnering with CDLLife, we get access to their audience. They poll them. We get real driver data about real issues and real driver opinions. So this week, talking about driver burnout, we posed the question, how often do you think about coming off the road? This is sad. So we asked daily, weekly, monthly, or never. 70.7% of drivers who responded think about getting off the road daily. 18.2 responded they think about getting out weekly. 9.1 responded they think about getting out monthly, and only 2% said never. That means 98% of drivers on the road, based on this data, are typically thinking about getting out of the truck at least once a month. I think that speaks highly to the situation the drivers are in.
Well, I mean, let's think about this. Being a former driver myself, I was always looking for a pathway out of the truck because we haven't made this sustainable for someone to want to do long term. I mean, based on just that poll alone, 2% of the people that participated said never. 70% said daily. So if you're sitting there thinking about this daily, you're stuck behind the wheel, and then you got one of those crappy dispatchers that have you sitting most of the time where all you do is think. Eventually you're going to hit one of those job boards or ads and look for something else. And with today's world and the pay the way it is, Chick-fil-A is catching up.
Well, I mean, and it's one of those things. It's sort of concerning. You know, you have people talking about a driver shortage and whatever, which obviously has clearly been debunked in this market. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, like everybody wants to try and get younger people into the truck, but like the drivers that you have now are struggling to cope with the conditions of the job. Like, I understand that, you know, from a carrier perspective, you know, there's an element of, you know, costs and stuff like that. Regulations are what they are. We've painted drivers in a corner, but at the same time, like, that is so concerning. There needs to be something done, and it needs to happen at like a top down level.
Well, absolutely. And I think this is just proof is in the pudding, and we're getting drivers' feedback thanks to CDLLife putting this poll out there. And one of the things that I read into this is we want to attract younger drivers, but do we really want to attract younger drivers? Because in order to do that successfully, they're looking for a more holistic approach. You have to have a pathway out of the truck. They're not going to want to be in the truck forever. They want a more wholesome environment. They want to be part of that culture and that direction. And is everyone ready to be able to do that successfully? That's a question they have to look internally and talk about.
Well, and I don't even know that like necessarily having a plan to get out of the truck. I think that honestly is kind of a scapegoat. I think what's interesting is this, if you know, from my opinion from this data, is no one wants to be in the truck because that, or thinks about getting out of the truck because it's just the conditions are so terrible. So it's like, I don't think a lot of these younger kids would have trouble creating a career being a truck driver and staying a truck driver, you know, obviously outside of market fluctuations. But the job isn't good.
Well, I mean, what's not appealing about lack of bathrooms, lack of parking, lack of pay, lack of any sort of job stability? What would you pass up on? I mean, what else would you want to do with your life if not that?
I don't know, man. I'd love to sit in traffic and be responsible for everybody around me and know that if they messed up, everyone's going to assume that I messed up first.
Maybe the drivers that are thinking about getting a truck just need to be selling chicken on the side, like that one guy. It's time to move on, guys, to our next segment, and that is This Week in Recruiting.
All right, so it's time for This Week in Recruiting, where we ask Charles, how has it been this week in recruiting?
It's been weird, man. This week in recruiting, it's that in-between stage that we've talked about between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that weird stage of recruiter, a driver, or anyone in transportation's in. It's no different than anyone else. No one wants to give up their seniority or anything like that right before a holiday, especially a major one. But one of the things I want to talk about is what people do with their marketing spends during this time. There's different opinions on what you should do during this time. Some people want to turn it all the way down. Some people want to turn it off. Some people amp it up. What's the right answer? And with dealing with so many carrier clients and in recruiting as in depth as we are over here at Hot Seat Services, my advice on this one is you don't want to shut down your pipeline. There may be drivers that need to for various reasons, whether company closure, especially in this market conditions, lack of miles, that might need that lifeline and need to see your company brand and make that jump before the holidays as an attempt to salvage their holidays. Or what about a driver that's supposed to be getting home that's not going to get home, or a driver that's not getting the pay that they were told they were going to make? You want to be in front of them. You want to be that solution to that problem, and that doesn't exist if you turn off your marketing spend. So from a recruiting perspective, my advice is you keep it running. Put your brand out there, and at worst case scenario, you're cultivating the field for after the holidays by keeping that pipeline flowing.
For sure. And the way that I've always explained it to people, and from my experience, is a good analogy, unless you live somewhere like Chattanooga and you text all your friends all the time, oh man, it's 73 degrees here. A lot of people at this time of year have to heat your house, right? And it's easier to leave that heater on. Even if you lower the temperature, it's easier to leave that heater on till you get home from work or whatever, to be able to heat your house. If you straight turn off the heater and you leave, when you come back to try and heat up your house, it's going to take forever. So it's like, if you turn it off during this time period, when it comes time January, when everybody's like picking back up, all the good drivers for tax reasons are willing to start switching jobs and that kind of thing, you're behind the eight ball, And so, yeah, kind of like to your point, Charles, this is probably the best time to put your brand in front of people, so you're top of mind. So when they do finally make that decision to change, they're thinking about you.
Well, and there's some added value to this. People are doing this different ways. So some people are turning it down. And when that happens, you have less competition present out there. So your bang for your buck will go a little bit further during this time if you have it placed strategically. It goes back to our past episode, knowing where to post, knowing what to do, knowing where to look for drivers. There's tons of options out there. I don't think you abandon all hope in this time, because you're going to pay for it come first quarter.
So it almost sounds like a Wall Street mentality, like when everybody's selling, buy, and when everybody's buying, sell.
That's a nice Cliff Note version of it.
But no, I think that's solid. And one thing I will say is, like, also, while you're branding during this time, not a whole lot of people care about seeing what your office employees do for the holidays in the office. If you guys do a gift exchange, that's great. But I'm pretty sure drivers passing by you on the internet don't really care.
That's solid advice. And I think it goes back to putting out the culture that you want to communicate through those channels, whether it's in your branding, whether it's in your advertising or marketing lead gen. You want to communicate properly with the audience that you're intended to get in front of. And if you're looking for drivers, you need to put stuff out there that's going to get the drivers to engage, get them interested in what you have to offer. And that starts with putting out content that's going to engage in the audience, which is the drivers in this case. So let them know what you do for them for the holidays. Let them know what you're doing for them as far as getting them home, getting them paid, bonuses, all that fun stuff. Put the focus around them, because they're the intended audience in this case. And if you want to be successful, just need to communicate with them properly.
Mesilla Valley Transportation, founded by truck drivers for truck drivers. Why choose MVT? Well, it's simple.
I started off as a driver. Now I'm managing routes. With MVT, the sky's the limit.
Balance is key. State-of-the-art equipment, a strong focus on safety, and a family-driven company culture where respect and hard work are at the core. Mesilla Valley Transportation, where we care about you. Join our family today.
All right, and it's time to make sense. It's time to get to our main topic. And this week we're talking about driver burnout. So that being said, I mean, I've spent a lot of time on the road, and the first thing I realized within my first 20 minutes of, being in, a truck with a driver going over the road is that nothing on the road is like you think it is until you actually go out on the road. And it's like this epiphany that everything is entirely different than what you thought it was going to be as an office employee and the way it's been described to you the entire time. So Charles, you having formerly been a driver, why don't you break down those differences for us?
You have a controlled environment to an extent when you're in an office. There's so many different things that are happening when you're outside in that truck rolling around. You have to worry about other general motoring public. You have to worry about shippers and receivers. You got to worry about the environment's changes. There's so many different contributing factors that drive not only your pay, your success, but just your day, your mentality. And then you have the stuff that doesn't stop while you're gone. Like when I was away from the family and stuff and on the road, it didn't stop home life from happening. Home life still took place. There were still bad days for them, bad days for my parents. And that news came to me through a phone, and I would have to sit there by myself, soak it in, and just soak on it the entire time. Like if you were upset, you had nothing to do to take your mind off of it. You were stuck in that truck, in traffic, driving, just stewing in it. If you were having something to celebrate, you were by yourself. There's not so much celebration when you're by yourself to share those. So you're calling people. Maybe you're driving around at night and you're tired. And normally everyone else gets to go to bed, but you got to find creative ways to stay awake. For me, that was talking to drivers I knew that worked on the same schedule. I can't tell you how many times on that CB or on my phone, I would talk to similar drivers in similar scenarios. And that was my way of coping and my way of getting through the day. But there's just so many outside factors that drive that experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I would always point out to people, is that, like, yeah, when you're a driver and something pisses you off, you got 11 hours to sit there and think about it. And the worst part is half the time, depending on your schedule, by the time that you're not behind the wheel and you have the ability to do it, or anything about it and make some calls to fix some stuff, most of the people you're going to call are either going to be asleep or at work, depending on when your schedule is. So, like, you can't even get things done when you do have the time to get things done. So it's like, you're just kind of stuck.
And you think about how some of these offers are set up, and some of them, when you hear them, they sound great. Like, you're going to be off on weekends. That sounds great. Except think of doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, legal appointments, whatever you might have. Most of them are closed on the weekend. So then you have to impact your pay and your home time in order to adjust to take care of those items. Then you have offers where you're gone on the weekend, where maybe your loved ones might be off, and you're home on the weekdays when they're working. So how much are you getting done on the personal level? So there's just so many things that happen that play into that overall driver experience when you're on the road. It's not hard to imagine why these guys and girls are getting burnt out on the road. And then you just add trucking into it.
Right. That's what I was about to say is you actually have the parts of the job that are the job that, like, you can't help. Like, you can't help traffic. You can't help weather. You can't help shippers and receivers. And most of the time you're not in control of that terrible detention conversation. And then on top of that, there's all the time, you have to sit there in time that you're not getting paid for, realizing, oh, I'm doing stuff, but I'm not getting paid for it, which, if that happened in any other job, most people quit.
And you're assuming there's a conversation around detention. Usually it's looking at your check and realizing you didn't get paid for it.
And calling and someone being like, sorry, bro.
No, it doesn't even go that way. I wish it went that way. At least in my experience, it was, hey, where's my detention? Well, let me transfer you to this person, or here's this number. I'll be driving, by the way, when this is happening. Here's this number. Call this guy or girl, and they're going to help you. And then that person steers you to someone else, and everyone forgets that you're driving. So they're giving you these different numbers, calling these different people, where if I was sitting on the other side of it, which I have, one of the first things that I've tried to implement was, if a driver calls the dispatcher, all the problems funnel through the dispatcher. It's the dispatcher's job or the driver manager's job to track down who should be addressing this. The driver's job is to drive. The moment you start having them try to find Waldo within the organization to address a problem, you're taking them away from that, and you're adding to the problems that drive that experience for that person that you're trying to say we like and we want to keep.
Do you have a pen? Yes, I do have a pen, but I also have 40,000 pounds behind me, and I'm going 65. Yeah. That works out great.
65. We have someone sitting in our passenger seat today. Charles, tell us who we have on the show with us in passenger seat.
Justin Martin from FreightWaves, a former driver, a friend, and somebody that offers a lot of insight into stuff like this. So welcome to the Cents Per Mile, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
So we're talking about driver burnout, the things that contribute to it, the things that we should be looking out for to avoid it, and ways to address it. Being a former driver and you kind of in a niche market when you drove, you offer a unique perspective to this. So tell us a little bit about what you think contributes to driver burnout.
Yeah, trying to plan for anything is never going to work. You really have to enjoy your home time, enjoy times with your friends and family when it's available. When you're on the road, don't think about, oh, I'll be able to get home on date X, Y, and Z. Chances are you're not. Just get home when your dispatcher can get you home and enjoy it while you can. I will disagree with what Paul said earlier about having an exit plan. I think most people that are in the trucks nowadays didn't get into trucking because like their parents were drivers or their brother or uncles or whatever were. Most people are in it because it's trucking is a last resort for these guys. Nietzsche has a really good quote saying that he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. So if you're struggling in the truck, but you're doing it because of a reason, like I have to do this because, my family needs that paycheck, or I'm doing this because it will get me experience in logistics that I can use to get out of the truck and do something else with it. You can use that to your advantage. That, I think, would help a lot with burnout with some guys.
I think having a light at the end of the road offers a motivation for somebody that might be looking to get out. You might have those people that are like, hey, I want nothing more than what I have and I'm happy with it. But wouldn't it be great to capture the other side of that where, hey, this is an option should you choose to take it. And these are the parameters that it takes to be successful to find that path.
Yeah, trucking, having a CDL is a golden ticket, and you can use that to open a lot of doors.
Well, and you've done that. So, I mean, you've driven and now you're a content creator and you're at FreightWaves and you get to talk to all these wonderful people. So in your experience, if you wanted to communicate to a carrier the best practice to avoid driver burnout, what would you be recommending right now?
Listen to the drivers and take their criticism to heart. Don't just say, oh, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Chances are, if you're hearing the same complaint from one person, that's one thing. But if you're hearing the same complaint from 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of your drivers, chances are there's something going on there.
That's awesome. And I want to piggyback off that. I think listening to them is the first step, but actions speak louder than any words. So it's one thing to collect that opinion and complaint, but it's another thing to address it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, Justin, thanks for coming on Cents Per Mile. Keep doing everything you're doing. We appreciate you. Love the content, and talk to you soon.
You got it, guys. Take care.
Hot Seat Services has Rent-A-Recruiter.
Wait!
Hey, Michael, have you heard that Hot Seat Services Rent-A-Recruiter service will place their staff in your organization similar to a temporary hire model?
No way. What else does it do?
Follow me. I have to tell everyone. They take leads in existing databases to put new hires into your business's trucks.
Well, shiver me timbers! What else?
Come on! Their model is more cost efficient because their recruiters are trained and can get your pipeline flowing easier and faster.
No way. Anything else?
No matter how many hires they make, it's a set cost per week, so the more they get, the better their client's cost per hire gets.
Holy sh**.
For more information and to find out for yourself, go to hotseatservices.com.
All right, now it's time to go on location, where we talk to somebody who's actually out in the field doing the work. And this week we've got Michael Lombard. How's it going, man?
What's going on, family? How we doing?
Nice to have you on the show, brother. You know, we're talking about driver burnout today, and I thought having you on the show was going to be unique because you've been the driver. You're now a recruiter at Hot Seat Services. You got best of both worlds. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on things that lead to driver burnout.
I mean, a lot of what leads into driver burnout is kind of what Paul was talking about earlier in the episode about how you have all these things and then that leaves out the trucking part, the trucking aspect. So you have this whole myriad of issues, and then you got to get to actually doing the job, which is the traffic, which could be long wait times, could be looking at your pay. So all of those things piling up over what could be you being away from home for several weeks. I mean, just stacks on top of each other. And there's really no relief. Like, your only relief is just marking the X's on the calendar towards when you're supposed to go home. And Lord willing, nothing gets in the way of that happening. So you're almost just like, you're almost on cruise control through your entire life. And you're like watching your life go by as you X off calendar days for you able to get home, decompress from being off the road. And you might only be home for 2 to 4 days, and then you're right back into it. So it's just your overall psyche and your physical body, your mental well-being. By the time you're able to decompress from trucking, whereas, most people leave work around 5, or even if you work 12 hours at there's people I know who work 12 hours in warehouses. They work 6 to 6, but they still have that 12 hours off. They can decompress. They can go to, a kickball game with, a league, a rec sports league. They could still fit some time in and decompress. Whereas like when a driver comes home, they're on home time, but the day they get home, they've got to take all the stuff off the truck. And this is just from my own personal experience, was like getting home was almost like, by the time it was you were ready to get home, you're like, I might as well just stay out, because you got to get everything from your truck, all your laundry, you got to get back home. And then like you were talking about earlier, when you're gone, how life is still like going on, like whether it be your family, your kids, whatever's going on, like all that's going on. And then when you come home, the world can't just all of a sudden stop and revolve around you. So when you're getting back, it's hard to time it to, hang out with your friends, like be kind of acclimated back into normal life, where then you've got to go right back out and do it. So you're asking the world to essentially stand still just because you happen to be there for 3-4 days.
You need a breath. And so what's unique about you, and one of the reasons I started following you in the first place, you found some creative ways to avoid that driver burnout, to give them something to almost use as an outlet when they're on the road. Tell me a little bit about what you found most beneficial for you that led you to the pathway that you're on now.
Yeah, staying laser focused on your overall health and wellness and your own personal excellence is probably the best way. And that's what kept my mind right. And this was because I know you asked Justin previously, like what carriers can do to help prevent this. And I'd say like top of the list, right next to flexible, trying to make flexible or realistic scheduling, as well as fair compensation, right up on the same playing field would be a health and wellness program and an accountability program on that aspect. Because if you don't take care of yourself when you're on the road, then those issues I just got done talking about compound even further. Because when you're not doing the necessary steps you need to do to maintain a healthy and sound body, it trickles right down into your mental health. Like when you take care of yourself physically, mentally, putting the right food in your body, not putting too much in your body, getting out, getting those steps in, going for a walk. When you do that, it trickles down right into your mental health. And if you're somebody who's like, well, I don't have time, I got to keep running, I got to drive, I got to get these miles, eventually you pay for that in the long run. Because if you don't do the necessary steps now, and you do want to drive that truck, you're one of those people who says, I never want to leave. This is my livelihood. I eat, sleep, and breathe it. If you want to run hard in your 20s and 30s and you don't take that accountability for yourself, especially with your health, then in your 40s and 50s, when those medical issues start catching up to you, that's when you're going to be forced off the road to then make those medical appointments. When your families probably need your paycheck more because your kids are in high school now, they're getting ready for college. And if you're not working because you've developed heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, you've developed all these things, that's eventually going to slow you down in the wrong one. And that was the biggest thing for me, like knowing that as soon as I pulled the yellow tab, instead of getting on TikTok or, and complaining like a lot of drivers like to do, because they're always in the comments sections, as soon as that yellow tab pulls, just knowing like getting out, getting fresh air, going for a walk, even if it's 20 degrees, you layer up, you get out there. When you do that, when you force yourself to do the hard things, the parts of trucking that do suck a little bit less.
And so that's awesome. And that's one of the things I was looking forward to you bringing onto the show, is not only saying how do I identify them, but also how do we address them. So if anyone wants to find Lombard, check him out at Lombard Trucking. He's on all the social sites, and you can also find him at Hot Seat Services. Thanks for coming on the show, Lombard.
Glad to be here, guys. Take care.
All right, gentlemen, this wraps up today's episode. We got a lot of information on driver burnout, but I think we about burned out our time on today's episode. So let's send this show out of here, shall we?
Thank you guys for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.